Ciguatera fish poisoning is caused by eating fish that have accumulated toxins produced by a microscopic algae called Gambierdiscus. These toxins build up in older and larger predatory reef fish such as barracuda, grouper, snapper, hogfish, and jack, as they consume smaller herbivorous reef fish that have eaten the algae throughout their life cycle. If a person eats a fish that contains a high quantity of ciga-toxins, they will experience a myriad of symptoms within 6 to 24 hours. This usually includes nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, neurological issues such as tingling fingers, muscle pain, joint pain, and temperature reversal where hot feels cold and vice versa. There is no specific cure, but the symptoms can be treated. And with time, a healthy diet, and eating no fish or seafood that contains even a small amount of the ciga-toxin seems to be the best. The worst of the symptoms usually goes away within a couple days, and all the symptoms usually are completely gone within a month. But this depends greatly on the dose a person receives and that individual's health. Currently, the toxin is completely undetectable by any means short of sending that fish to a laboratory to be tested. Meaning, you cannot see it, you cannot smell it, you cannot see it with a regular microscope, you can't feel it, and there are no identifiable biomarkers within the fish that have it. The toxin does not affect fish, but does harm humans and other mammals by attacking their nervous system. Gambierdiscus microalgae only grows on coral and tropical regions. This is seen around the world where symptoms can vary slightly depending on the region you get it in. This is because of the different species of Gambierdiscus that produce different toxins. Alright, now that you have a basic understanding of Ciguatera, I'm going to explain to you the 2 times I've gotten it. First was in Andros in the Bahamas, where I'd eaten a tiger grouper. It wasn't particularly large, but tiger grouper are a slow-growing species, meaning this one was much older. I spearfished the fish off a reef like any other, and me and my crew had been eating fish like this for several days before this. However, the next day we all noticed that we felt very tired and very fatigued. There wasn't really too much other symptoms besides that. Thankfully, we only ate the fillets on the fish, because the majority of the ciga-toxin is held within the liver, and then next beyond that would be the brain, the head meat, and then the bones themselves, as well as skin. So if you go to make a fish soup and you're eating every part of the fish, if it does have ciga-toxin, you get the largest dose that way. That was one of many lessons I would learn. About a week later, I caught a pretty big mahi-mahi while trolling behind my sailboat. I ate the entire fish and I felt no adverse symptoms from Ciguatera. I'll discuss why this was later, because only a couple weeks after that, I ended up spearfishing some very large Ciguatera snapper, which do live on the reef. Both nights I ate Ciguatera snapper, I would feel some sharp joint pain, but it then went away later. This will all help give me a better picture of how Ciguatera affects people. All in all, I would say my symptoms were completely gone in less than a month, and I would go back to eating all different types of reef fish thereafter and experience no side effects ever since. Now the second time I got Ciguatera, I was off of St. John in the US Virgin Islands, but I wasn't alone. I had with me Captain Blake Sparrow, Captain Jack Spiro, Raph and Sosh from Spirit Animal, and my buddy Dylan, who was crewing for me at the time but would normally be living in California. And that's important, I'll explain why in a second. Effectively, myself, Blake, Jack, Raph had all had Ciguatera before. And not only that, we had all had it from tiger grouper, we would later find out. So we knew not to spear tiger grouper. However, we ended up spearing and eating a yellowjack, and that night we all got sick with it, except for Sasha, who didn't eat any. So we had a very easy control to say exactly what the fish was. The fish in that case was a yellowjack, and we had all eaten tons and tons of them. We knew you could get Ciguatera from them, but we just didn't think it would happen. But it did. Raph in the past had probably the worst Ciguatera out of all of us, and yet again he seemed to get the worst reaction to it. I think this also has to do with him having alcohol that night, and alcohol is known to really flare up all of your symptoms, even months later. Myself, I don't ever drink alcohol, so I've never had to experience this, but it seemed pretty bad what he had to go through. We all just felt sick, we all felt achy, all of our joints hurt. Dylan was sleeping for quite a while, and I was surprised to see that Dylan got it about as bad as I did, because I know I've accumulated more toxins than he has easily because I've been spearfishing and eating in those areas. So this is where it becomes a little bit murky of exactly how does this toxin function. But I was one of the first ones to wake up and realize I definitely had Ciguatera at I think about 3 in the morning. I began inducing vomiting and drinking a lot of water. I just wanted to purge out any undigested yellowjack that I might have left in my stomach. I don't know if I really had much, unfortunately, because it had to have been right at that 6-hour later mark. I also took some activated charcoal, which I think also really helped me get over things quicker, but we all ended up doing this as well because we knew this was probably the best that we could do. There is talk of, I believe, matadol, I can't quite pronounce it right, but it's an IV that you have to go to a doctor to get. It's a vascular dilator, and I have heard that if you get to that within 72 hours, that can greatly reduce the symptoms that you're going to go through. It's not a complete cure, but it can do a whole lot. I like to hear more about this, but right now from the scientists, from the PhD marine biologists that I have talked to, they have not confirmed that this is any sort of a cure. The 5 of us all kept in touch through WhatsApp, and we all figured it took about a month for us to get over the symptoms. Raph took quite a bit longer, but again, he had probably the worst of all of us years back, and we also realized that he probably ate a little bit more of the yellow jack that night than we did. We would later find out that the south side of St. John is well known for having substantially more Ciguatera cases, and the north side is well known for having significantly less. There's a lot of factors that could go into this. If I had to take my guess, I would say that it's shallower water, potentially more polluted. There is talk of that affecting these things, versus the north is much deeper water. I think the deeper water is less places for these microalgae to grow effectively. There's just less habitat for them there. So the predatory reef fish there might be going just off their ledges to go grab a pelagic bait fish or feeder fish. To help try to encapsulate this and answer all of you guys' questions, I just got some FAQs written here, so I'm gonna just go right down the list. Number 1, is there any way to test whether or not a fish has Ciguatera? No, there's no commercially viable test that will tell you that. A few I've seen sold, but they never last because they don't work. The ciga-toxin is at times, depending on which of the 8 different toxins they've identified, one of them is harmful to mammals in the parts per billion. And you need to send that to a US laboratory, I believe it's in Alabama, to get that tested. However, there is one surefire way I've come up with to test for Ciguatera, though it's got some moral implications, and that's very simply to have a mammal eat whatever it is that you have in question, and then wait 24 hours, see if there's any symptoms. I saw this when I was in Alaska at a oyster farm that was taking the oysters and testing them for paralytic shellfish poisoning, which is very similar to the ciga-toxin. They would send it up to a lab, and the lab would just feed it to mice. And I like that idea because you could feed effectively the body weight worth of the mice, versus if I'm eating fish, I'm not gonna eat more than a pound. That's not 1% of my body weight. As well, you could feed maybe the liver to the mouse. As well, I've heard people doing this with cats or with dogs, and that's where the moral implications come in. And then on top of that, I've heard in places in Cuba, they would have one guy in the village who was like, that was his job. He would test fish and tell anybody if he was feeling anything. It's not exactly rocket science testing it that way, but I could see it being very efficient. And I myself has considered keeping mice on my boat for just that purpose. Question number 2, can you prevent Ciguatera? No. But there's a few things you can do to hedge your bets so you don't get one of those fish. The first thing I would say to do is talk to the locals. Talk to the local fishermen. What fish will they not bring to market for the locals there? That's what you want to know. In a lot of areas, I've heard them say like, oh no, we don't touch schoolmaster snapper here. They pretty much all say they don't touch tiger grouper, which I think is pretty interesting. Some people say they won't touch black grouper in one place, and so on and so forth. So getting that local knowledge I think is one of the best, because they've been eating that fish and they know what's going to work and what's not. What should you do if you've eaten a fish and you begin to feel the onset of the symptoms? I believe that you should first ingest as much water as you can real quick, and then try to purge. Just try to throw it all up, get it all out of your system as fast as you can, and then get the activated charcoal. That will help absorb anything else that's in there. It's pretty basic stuff. It's not exactly rocket science. Again, if you can get to a doctor, especially if it's bad, I highly recommend that. Get to an ER, tell them exactly what happened, what your symptoms are, let them diagnose it. It is a fairly more commonly known thing now as time has gone on. But not eating a ciga-toxin fish and then trying to get it out of your system before you digest it are the 2 best ways. Is one part of the fish more likely to have more toxin than the other? Yes, but it's not the tail or the loin. It's that the liver would accumulate the majority of the toxins if they were there. Then it would be the head meat, inside the head, in the bones, in between the bones, that connecting fluid, the bones themselves, and then the skin. The fillets are actually the least likely to have ciga-toxin in them. Unfortunately, my buddy Raph from Spirit Animal, he learned this lesson the hard way. He took a tiger grouper and he made an entire soup out of it, and he drank the broth. And remember, you can't taste it, you don't know anything, and it sure tasted delicious, but he really paid the price for a couple months to come. Are there fish in the tropics or around areas of the coral that have no chance of Ciguatera? Yes, there are. Effectively, it's just any fish that's not eating the small herbivorous fish you're going to be good from. So first off, going just a little bit outside of the reef, you would have things like mahi-mahi, tuna, maybe a marlin, any sort of fish like that that's just out there in the deep blue, no chance of Ciguatera. On the reef though, you still have a good chance if you eat fish like African pompano, permit, and mutton snapper. They're primarily crab eaters. Mutton snapper can eat a wider range of diet, but a permit and an African pompano have no chance of Ciguatera. Can Ciguatera kill you? Yes, but it's incredibly rare to get a fatal dose, and usually it's complications from other things, and especially in conjunction with alcohol. And I know saying don't drink alcohol with your fish, because it's probably what you want to do to have a nice dinner, but it's just something maybe afterwards, or don't drink as much, because it will definitely inhibit how long it takes you to get better. Can you build an immunity to this toxin or to this poison? I think we've heard about this before, where the guy from The Princess Bride built up a tolerance to the toxin. Him and the other guy both drank the toxic cup, but he survived. It's not that way with Ciguatera. It seems to be something more that your body accumulates, though again, I feel that my body fully flushed it out from the last time that I had it, and I feel like I've bounced back pretty well since. I have eaten reef fish since the second time I got it. Not a ton, but just here in the Dominican Republic, I felt no symptoms whatsoever. What can make it worse if you already have it? Like I said, alcohol is a big no-no. The other one is eating other fish that are on the reef. So eating another snapper, for example, like I did, will give you a small flare-up. The way I've sort of understood it is your body can accumulate this toxin and really have no side effect from it. But once it reaches a threshold, then you get a flare, a myriad of all these different symptoms at once. As long as you're below that threshold, you're gonna do good. But as your body's trying to heal from it, it's coming back down. Just before it gets there, it's a little more sensitive. I think that's what happened with me, because I shared my big snapper with other people, other locals. No one else felt anything from it, only I did. Can you cook or freeze the meat to destroy the toxin? No, the toxin is not temperature sensitive. There is no way to break down the toxic chemical compound that is negatively affecting us. What are some of the other most common signs and symptoms? Signs are actually really hard to tell. It's very rare that a person will just outwardly display what it is besides showing that they are in pain. Symptoms, so you're going to have to really talk to the person to find out what it is, are very wide depending on not just the amount of toxin they got, but where in the world they are, because different Gambierdiscus around the world have a slightly different concoction of the toxin. But the symptoms can include nausea, joint pain, vomiting, stomachache, headaches, muscle soreness, fatigue, itching. I hear a lot of locals say that if they eat a fish with cig, they just itch a little bit for a little while. Or if they eat a fish with cig and they have alcohol, they'll itch a little bit. So something to be aware of there. Tingle of the fingers, tingle of the toes, I got that for a little bit as well. Cold things feeling hot, hot things feeling cold. That was an interesting one, and you just kind of just grit and bear it. It's not too bad. I have heard of blindness, and I have heard of depression as well. So it just depends on how bad of a dose you got. This toxin attacks the nervous system, so it's pretty difficult to nail down exactly what one symptom it has. It's going to be a myriad. I would say the joint pain, the stomach ache, and then the hot and cold being reversed, those ones are like really quintessential symptoms of ciga-toxin. Can lobsters, crab, or octopus carry ciga-toxin? Maybe. Sorry to be vague about this, but only recently when I was talking with the professor did I find out that they have actually found ciga-toxin in some lobsters, or they had a few cases reported of it. Now, it's unclear exactly how that happened. It's possible that maybe there was some fish mixed in there, or who knows what, but theoretically it is possible that a lobster was able to eat a lot of other fish in its time, because the lobsters in the Caribbean are going to be carnivorous. They're not like the painted lobsters in Australia that are going to be herbivores. There's only a few lobster species out there that are herbivores. These ones are carnivores, and they want to be either pulling open, you know, an urchin, or eating on a dead carcass. So that would have had to have been one very unlucky crustacean. I don't know the science on that one. I assume it's pretty minimal, but generally speaking, lobsters, crab, and octopus, you're just fine eating them. There has been no case that I've heard of, only from the one conversation with the professor. And if anyone does have more information on Ciguatera from things other than fish, please feel free to comment or reach out to me. I'd love to learn more about that. So you might be getting the sense of, wow, this is an incredibly complex topic. Why is that? I broke it down into 10 different things I think make this so difficult, so I'm gonna kind of just read off the list here. First off is the geographic location. Some places are better at growing Gambierdiscus than others. Like I said, on the north side of St. John's, I think there was just deeper water there, and it just goes deep too quick, so there just isn't enough real estate to actually grow Gambierdiscus. The next one would be the actual local ocean health and water there. Maybe it's in a spot that just gets pounded by waves, so not much can grow there. Maybe there is a river nearby that either dumps a lot of nutrients and makes it grow faster, or doesn't allow any nutrients, or blocks it out. There's little factors like that that could cause there to be more or less Gambierdiscus on a particular area. Third one would be the life cycle of various Gambierdiscus microalgae. There are 18 different species of Gambierdiscus, and then about 60 dioflagellates species that are known to produce toxins that vary in their structure and effect that would produce a toxin. And this could easily be confused for Ciguatera as well, adding to the confusion. The fourth one would be, of those 18 species of Gambierdiscus, each of them produces either a different amount or a different number or only one of the 8 differently known ciga-toxins, the actual toxin that is making us sick, that this microalgae just happens to be producing. Gambierdiscus is the genus, so there is quite a few other organisms within there, but out of them, only 18 actually produce this toxin. Bear with me, folks. And the important thing to understand about these 8 different toxins that are produced is, as would explain to me, one of them is harmful to humans in the parts per thousands, I believe they said, or maybe even 100,000s, which is still like, okay, that's not too bad. Another one, though, is significantly harmful in the parts per billion. That, again, makes it so much harder to detect, to see, and if you were then to get, I mean, you could much easier have a higher dosage then. So this really adds to the confusion and the complexity to this topic. 5, next up we have the life cycle and habit of the herbivorous reef fish. That could be a huge one there. Maybe the herbivorous reef fish in one area somehow just skip over the Gambierdiscus. Maybe in another one they only eat that. And again, that could add or subtract from why an area is more of a hotspot. Number 6, then we have the life cycle of the predator reef fish. It is my understanding that the tiger grouper likes to live in one spot. It does not like to move, it does not like to migrate. That makes sense then, that if that tiger grouper was in an area that was a hotspot for Ciguatera, that it would only be eating fish that were then getting the ciga-toxin. As opposed to other fish, like say a mutton snapper or a Ciguatera snapper that have a much wider range and eat different things, not just herbivorous reef fish, more likely to be okay. As well as I found out with the larger Ciguatera snappers, because I've eaten Ciguatera snapper, I think up to 55 pounds, maybe a 60-pound one that I had speared, it had evidence of stingray barbs in its sides here and right here between the teeth. I've speared other ones that were slightly smaller, 40 to 50-pound range, and they had an entire stingray down their throat, and another one had an entire lobster. So that tells me that Ciguatera snappers, when they get larger, become more specialized in what they're hunting, not just the little fish, so less chance of having Ciguatera. Number 7 now would actually be the life cycle of the person, their age, their habits, their genetics, their diet, their drinking. All of these things are greatly going to determine what symptoms they have that follows. Number 8 then is, does it even get reported? Most Ciguatera cases don't get reported. People don't know what it is, they assume they just have a bug, and they just go through it, or a lot of times it's not that bad. So it's really hard to know where and when people get it, and what fish and what area it was from. Number 9. There's not a ton of money out there on the research for this. I think a lot of the money might go towards preserving certain species or helping to restore coral. And then lastly, number 10, of course, is that it's really hard to detect, measure, and thereby research. It's very complicated how they actually test if a fish has Ciguatera. They have to send the fish to a lab in, I believe, Alabama. It's like one of the only places in the world that can do it. And the way that they have some sort of a sample to know if a fish has Ciguatera or not is they caught literally 10,000 barracuda, and they basically melted them down or put them in a centrifuge or something like that happened. They took the fish with the most likely to have Ciguatera in the most ciga-toxin area, and they basically boiled that down until they had pure ciga-toxin, as I understand it. That's what they try to compare it against. It's not easy to do any of this research, folks. So now that you've heard all the bad news, here's my most practical advice. First off, if after watching this video, you decide that you never want to eat a fish in the Bahamas ever again, I'm totally fine with that. More fish for me. After my last time I had Ciguatera, literally that night, the sun hadn't even come up yet, I was still ready to go eat more fish. It was bad, it wasn't great, but it wasn't the end of the world. This isn't something that makes you paralyzed for life, that yes, one person I have heard of going blind, but there's a lot of other factors that could have been involved there. I doubt it was just a fish that did that to him. Since I first sailed to the Bahamas some 5 years ago, Ciguatera was very much like a boogeyman. There was all this mystery behind it, and there was a lot of misnomers on it. Like those ridiculous ways to test if a fish has Ciguatera that do not work. But I easily eat 10 times the amount of fish that any sailor in the Bahamas does because I'm spearfishing for it. In a few weeks now, I'm gonna set sail back to the Bahamas for 100 days where I'm gonna be completely off grid, and I'm pretty much just gonna be eating seafood. That's how not afraid of this boogeyman that is Ciguatera I am. I'm gonna be smart about it. I'm not gonna eat massive barracudas or probably any tiger grouper. I don't care the size on those ones. I'm gonna stay away from big schoolmaster snapper. I'm gonna target mutton snapper. I'm gonna continue to target large Ciguatera snappers, knowing that they do have a small amount of ciga-toxin in them for sure, but it will not be enough to affect me as long as I don't have a flare-up. I'm going to eat a small bit of said large fish before I go on to share it with other people. I'm going to be targeting fish like African pompano, mahi-mahi, and wahoo out in the deep blue. I'm going to talk to the locals, see what they won't eat in a certain area. There are some areas, for example, too close into Georgetown, that I simply won't touch because there's too many people there, and I worry about pollution adversely affecting the reef and causing a bloom of the Gambierdiscus microalgae. Little things like that I think are going to save me a whole lot in the end. as well as having my choice of litter for all different things like lobsters, crabs, and even octopus that I enjoy eating out there. So what I would say to you is to be smart. Don't go for massive fish. King mackerel or another one you might want to stay away from. And in different parts of the world, there's other fish species I just don't know the name of. However, they're very similar to all the species that I've mentioned here. They're either a wrasse, a snapper, a grouper, a pelagic, an amberjack, one of those or nearby it. Talk to the locals in your area. Carry some activated charcoal on your boat. If you feel like you're getting sick, induced vomiting, activated charcoal, don't drink alcohol. Drink plenty of water, drink electrolytes, that helped a whole lot too as well. And you know what? Don't let it get you down too much. There's still a ton of delicious fish out there in the ocean, and it's really not worth skipping out on. This video is the culmination of my own academic research, my own personal experience having had Ciguatera twice, interviews with marine biologists who've studied in this field, and interviews with other people who've been poisoned. This is a highly complicated subject, and even amongst the scientists, it's not fully understood. That being said, I am a YouTuber. I am not a scientist. I've made this video with the best intentions and information available. I do not wish to add to the misinformation out there on the subject, but I'm sure I got at least one thing wrong here. So, I'm keen to use this video as a platform to start a dialogue and help get the correct and necessary information out to the public. So if you have any credible scientific information or corrections you'd like to share, please comment them down below with a link to the scientific journal that you got the information from, or other verified scientific sites. I look forward to hearing what others have to say on this topic, and I certainly hope this video helps you better understand Ciguatera. Cheers, and I'll see you on the next adventure, where I'm probably gonna go eat some fish. Thanks for joining me on this adventure. I hope you feel inspired to begin adventures of your own. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. For an exclusive, in-depth look at this adventure lifestyle, and to further support my channel, become a member of my Patreon crew. Link in the description. I'll see you on the next adventure.